For some reason, I was struck by the need to rank all the Estinian pairings, but first I'm going to need to list them all and gather my own thoughts. So I'm going to start off with Estinian and Aymeric. They're the most popular ship. They're classic and for good reason. They have a really nice uh, dynamic going on, to be honest. They have history together, which makes for a lot of good canon material to work with and pull ideas from. So they have that pre-established relationship that is not only in the past, like them having a friendship, but in the present. Whenever you first meet either of them, unless you're a dragoon and started with the dragoon quest and that is dating first, um, they're already together, and really have a close working relationship. And it shows that they have a close personal relationship as well. So that just makes it even more impactful whenever later on Aymeric has to try anyway to kill Estinian just to save his people because Estinian is being possessed by Nidhogg. That angst, that juicy, juicy angst makes this a really good ship. And like I was talking about earlier, their dynamic is pretty good. They have even though they're both, I hate whenever people moify Aymeric. It's kind of my pet peeve, um, because he really does have a lot of strengths to him. But he is still at his heart, um, kind of a softy, a little good boy who goes to church and read his Bible. And Estinian is like it's just so even he also on the other side has a really good heart. He projects this angst, not angst, but like edginess. Well, he does have angst at the beginning, in the Dragoon quest line. Um, but anyways, so it makes them like really compatible, but they have enough like opposite presentations that really work together and make them a good like kind of like a power couple in a way. Um, uh, I wouldn't say to the extent of maybe some other pairings, but it is a factor. Now, Estinian and Gaius is not one that immediately drew me in. In fact, I didn't even know it was a ship until I saw that quite a few people actually ship it. This is probably mostly in the Stormblood, maybe Shadowbringers era. But it's interesting to me because prior to this time, most ships, at least as far as I'm aware, were of Estinian and other people from Ishgard. So this was kind of him, like branching out, I guess, and growing as a character, from the place that we originally knew him from. And so I think that's very interesting. And there's a lot of stuff that you could probably work with there. Um, it seems to me that most people like to play on, obviously Ishgard has its hardships and internal turbulence, and so does Garlemald. I mean, that goes without saying. It's the whole game. That's the game. So people mostly play on that, that one singular time that they worked together in the game. Um, and I guess there was some. It wasn't mostly like unseen content, because I think there was a short story kind of talking about what they were doing, and I know we do see some scenes here and there in the game. Um, and they do have a dynamic of, I guess, how I would assume most people that are interested in most people who are interested in them are probably the people who are um lesbians but like old men who are really gruff. They probably watch Hannibal or Supernatural. Maybe they are like domesticating now and watch Succession. Um that's my opinion. Maybe not Succession. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, so they kind of have that like tough guy kind of thing going, and that's usually how Estinian is portrayed with him. It's either they're both two gruff guys and they're just being men and they're being nasty and rough, or Estinian kind of gets moified, which is really, really, really funny to me. But I respect it. So that's kind of my opinion on this dynamic they have going on here. Now, Estinian and Ysayle, when I first went through Heaven's Word, I wasn't sure how to feel about Estinian. He was funny, and there are some things I liked about him, but mostly he just kind of seemed like a toxic kind of dude. And so whenever I saw people were shipping him with Ysayle, I was like, no, Ysayle deserves better than that. She deserves better than that. And now I'm like the reverse. I'm like, Estinian deserves Ysayle because he ended up, as we saw, I don't even think it was character growth. I think it was just us understanding. I mean, there was character growth, of course, but it was mostly the player understanding him better and what was actually in his heart versus how he was acting. So I now that we know him deeper, and we saw like him leaving the flowers for Ratatoskr, however you pronounce it, and all the times that he thinks about Ysayle and respects her and stuff. It's so cute and it's so wholesome and it's good. It would be a really, really good story narratively to have this guy who was had this strong vengeful feelings for dragons because they killed his family, falling in love with a heretic who it was possessed by somebody who was in love with dragons. It's just it's such a good story. I love it so much. I think they really pair well together, especially if Estinian were acting then as he does now, and finally coming like kind of into sort of maturity in accepting his own um inner feelings like that. I mean, he doesn't soften entirely. He still kind of has his, that's just his personality. But like, we know his heart now. Um, I think that it would really be a really sweet thing with Ysayle because they both kind of have like their um, toughness, I guess, and like, take no crap personalities, but they're also really sweet. And I don't know, I just think it's not just because they're similar, but also just because, like, in the ways that they're um, different in their, I guess, kind of in a different way than the Stan and Aymeric, but just how they like project themselves is a little bit different. Um, and I think that they would do like great things together, like really. And I think they would, have good kids. Honestly, I'm really surprised how much Estinian and Haurchefant is like a rare pair because I mean, like back in like the Heavensward sort of days, it seems like uh people just shipped all the elves in together. And that's usually why you see them together is because they're also with Aymeric, but you never see them alone. And I don't get why, because I think that it's really, especially if you're going off of like that era of how they were acting and like just what we knew in the story, I guess, at that time. And I say that like I was there, but I scour the internet for old content all the time. Um, anyway, I think it would be so like, oh, it'd be good, it'd be juicy, because Estinian was such a broody, angsty, gruff boy, and kind of like very reserved. Meanwhile, Haurchefant was quite outspoken, and he was very generous with his compliments, no matter what degree they were at. Um, and so I would love to see him being very extroverted and embarrass the crap out of Estinian publicly all the time. Oh, I think it'd be so good. And I think that Archibald could give Estinian what he needs. And ultimately, this is what all these ships are about. They're about Estinian and what I think he deserves. Um, yeah, that's about all I got. Estinian and Graha is kind of, now that I think about it, Estinian and Haurchefant, but upgraded. Because no, there's differences. But it is kind of similar in the vein that um I think that Graha is quite mushy, where Esteen is not. And I think Graha would like publicly embarrass Esteen quite a bit. But I also think they would be so fun. Like, I first considered it a few years ago before Endwalker came out when a now deleted Twitter user made a post about their headcanon on what they think would happen in Endwalker. And it involved Graha and Estinian having to sneak into Charlian and pretend to be existing students. And Graha kind of knows this song and dance because he's been a student before, and he's pulled off some good personas in the past. But Estinian is just, he gets asked a scholarly question. He's like about to throw up from anxiety like the whole time. um, but also there's the element of Graha being kind of clumsy and not great at keeping a secret. But meanwhile, like Estinian, even though he's more skilled at sneaking around, he is very blunt and not at all discreet. But they both have really good, strong skills. Like, I think this works best if you take deeply into consideration Graha's time as the Exarch, which I don't. People are kind of mixed on if they consider that or if they just completely ignore it and moify him. I think the ship can work good in either case. I think it's fun in either case, but my personal preference is taking that into consideration. Just because I think Estinian has a level of maturity that I would like Graha to meet, just for their relationship to have any depth to it. But also, I'm not opposed to people just slapping on that. I think it was Corpse. There's an audio on TikTok of Corpse saying, "Hey, kitty," in his deep voice.
I am a pious man. No temptation can stray me from the path of God.
Hey, kitty.
Yeah, just to prevent people from just taking that one thing and that's Justinian and Grah's whole ship dynamic. Because honestly, it's really tempting. Now, Estinian and Urianger have exactly that maturity thing I was talking about. Um, we do actually have proof that Estinian can read and does so on a regular basis because actually I've won a random Moogle quest or a quest before you get to the Moogle tribe. Um, there's some girl who talks about him doing reports and stuff because of some group, I guess, of dragoons he was with. And then he mentions an Endwalker hating bureaucracy and doing paperwork. So, like, he has had to do it. Um, so I think that even though he's not, we don't really know him as a reader, he's more of like a physical type of person. I think it would be a nice, interesting dynamic to kind of have a jockey kind of person and the nerdy kind of person, but they're able to get on each other's levels still because Dean does have that background of at least being able to do that stuff, even if he's not a huge fan of it. And Virion J, I mean, obviously he fights, so he has to have some sort of physical aspect to him. But also, Astrologian, the group or whatever is from, it may not be from, it's not from, it's from Charlian. But there's a, what's the word I'm looking for? Dang it. A branch of Inishgard. So I'm sure, even though it was kind of frowned upon, I think Estinian would have some knowledge of it at least, and I feel like they could bond over that a little bit of being in a similar age, like Haranji says. I mean, he's obviously expressed interest in befriending Estinian, so that's already something in the canon to go off. But also, what's really good about this pair is that they're both definitely autistic and very shy and reserved, but in totally different ways. And I don't know, I think it'd be really cool. And they both share like a confliction of like, what is the right thing I should be doing in this moment? We see that a lot with Urian Jane getting tricked to um, betray people or keep secrets. And Estinian was trying to balance seeking vengeance and seeking justice, which obviously you can't do both. And he was always torn on how to make himself feel right and like he was doing the right thing. I think that'd be very interesting, just from like a psychological perspective. Um, Seeing those two together, even just standing beside each other. um, but also because Ariane is like a little bit softer, it kind of gets that aspect in there going as well. Estinian and Lyse have so much in common, but like in the weirdest ways possible. Like they are nothing alike, but at the same time they both have that jockey kind of aura about them, and they're both such real and earnest, I guess is the word I'm looking for, characters. Like I think this is really obvious with Lyse. I mean, just from the beginning, she I don't want to say she's stupid by any means, but she's definitely um has a less of a grasp of what's going on than some other people. And she was always asking like, okay, so what does that mean? Or like, I don't get it. Things that like the player might be wondering. And I feel like in a way the writers kind of used her to like fill in those blanks, like to prompt along further explanation. Um, but Estinian is also kind of in that way. Similar, like he kind of serves that role later on because he has not been a part of the team for like all the story leading up to the end of Shadowbringers. But I genuinely think I don't think that was just a writing thing. I think that's also part of this their characters. Um, this kind of being more shut in a way. I don't know, but it's not not that they're not as intelligent. They just have a different level of it's the neurodivergence, maybe. I don't know. they just take in the world differently than other people. And I can also see them getting into so much trouble and shenanigans. Like, we've seen Estinian hop out of roofs or balconies. I could see Lyse doing that just because she thinks it's fun. I think they would be major thrill chasers together. They would be the ones who are like constantly going on crazy road trips and skydiving and doing crazy things. And I love that for them. I love them chasing the thrill and the hype and just living their best wild lives together. Like they would never have an uninteresting story. Like crazy things just happen to them. I think that'd be just a lot of fun to pit against each other. But also, I mean, in a way, like Lyse also has lost everything. Well, she lost everything, but then she was able to regain it back and fight for her country. And in a way, I mean, is that not kind of Estinian's sort of story? I mean, he had a little bit of a different role, actually a way different role than she did, but he was still um kind of on that front line in changing things. Um and I think that they could bond a lot over that too. Okay, here's how Estinian and Thancred would happen. Sometime in late Heavensward or Stormblood, Thancred would be mourning the loss of Minfilia, and Estinian would kind of awkwardly try to sympathize with him by talking about Ysayle and that loss because Thancred never really like knew Ysayle to mourn her. Um, but it's quite obvious that Estinian does in the story. So he might kind of apply his feeling and logic towards it, even though Thancred would be like, it's totally different with you, dude. Like you did not know Minfilia like I did. Or like you did not know Ysayle like I knew Minfilia. It was a totally different relationship. And Sadie would be like, yeah, that's true. Um, but they would still kind of have a little bit of a heart to heart, in an awkward way. And then they would bang wildly. Okay, maybe not like right after that, but like at some point. It's kind of hard to think of the ship without thinking about stuff like that. Um, just because I mean, maybe that's just how most of the people who ship this, even though it's a rare pair, that's kind of the angle they go at it with. Um, but because they're both kind of a little bit, if not angsty, a little bit edgy, kind of rough guys. Um, but however, I think that there is kind of similarities in that they both have a lot of feeling they hide in some way. Um, it's a huge part of Thancred's character arc. You'd have to be not paying attention to not catch how he like at the beginning was just throwing himself into like women and alcohol and kind of a carefree attitude whenever he cares so deeply about just a lot of things. And then we have Estinian who just kind of seems like cold and callous and distant. But then Heidelin talks about his warm, huge heart. Um, and I think, that is kind of like a nice similarity, but they're also so different. Thancred is so feely, and Estinian is so logical. And I think they would bump heads quite a bit, but I also think they'd be a major team, like a great team. Because um the first off, they're both incredibly skilled. They have a lot of different skills. But also with Thancred's like espionage and kind of stuff. Estinian's brute force. But also Thancred has the brute force too. Thancred just has everything, okay? So this is kind of like a rigged situation. Um like his whole thing at the end of Endwalker when Medion is like, I don't know, gassing everybody or whatever, and he pushes through it to try to swing a sword at him. First off, that was so hot. Second, that is kind of a behavior that I feel like Estinian would have of like, okay, just attack and kill it and get it gone. But obviously he did it because I don't know, he's just different than Thancred. Anyway, I think they both have similarities and compatibility that would make them quite a power couple. Estinian and the Warrior of Light is hard to have comments on because it would highly depend on the person's Warrior of Light whether or not they're compatible and all the details of that. However, there are some good canon material uh, to work with, I guess, with this ship. Like specifically, I'm thinking at the end of Stormblood, um, him picking up your unconscious body and dropping you off at Aymeric's door, like he's a cat and you're a half dead bird, and he's like, "Fix it, human." I think that stuff is very sweet. And kind of, you kind of, it's not spoken, but you kind of go to like a not an enemy to lovers, not enemy to lovers or enemies to friends. But not even that, just like a because he's just his character arc, he's kind of like douchey and weird and standoffish, and it's hard because he's constantly trying to do the opposite of what the Warrior of Light is trying to do. It's like, dude, like stop talking about killing dragons in front of dragons. Like we're not. That's not our. We're trying to make peace. Shut up. Stop. And then later on, like you're working side by side, and um, it's just a really great thing. So I think that that could also be something that would be really good to play off of. But at the same time, they don't really shove you into him as much as they do other NPCs. Like other NPCs might actively flirt with you, or they have like a really close emotional, like heart to heart kind of moment, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, oh, I'm down bad for this person. But that's not Estinian. That's not his personality. Um, but I think they do a good job of having some good stuff that I think could be really interesting if played with right. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say for that pair. So this video took a lot longer to edit than I assumed it would. So that's all I'm going to do for this one. I might make another video, like a part 2, before I move on to the ranking side. I just want to do what I personally think is the best to the worst. And then also some other factors, like ranking them by AU ability, stuff like that, you know. Uh, so yeah, if you enjoyed this video, let me know, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!